The message arrived at exactly midnight, Earth Standard Time. Every communication hub across the Terran Empire received it simultaneously. Ambassador Zixthar of the Collective stood before the camera, its 6 eyes blinking in slow rotation as it delivered words that would echo through human history. The Collective demands the immediate surrender of all Terran colonies in the Outer Rim. You have 72 hours to comply. Failure to do so will result in total war. Your species will be erased from existence. The transmission ended. Silence filled the war rooms of 100 worlds. For 300 years, humanity had expanded across the stars. They had built an empire that stretched across 4 galactic arms. They had fought pirates, survived plagues, and overcome challenges that would have broken lesser species. But they had never faced the Collective. The Collective was ancient. They had conquered over 2,000 species across 10,000 years. Their fleet numbered in the millions. Their soldiers were countless. They had never lost a war in their entire recorded history. Every species that had opposed them now served them as slaves or had been completely destroyed. Admiral Helena Vance stood aboard the ISS Retribution, flagship of the Imperial Third Fleet. She was 63 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had commanded fleets for 30 years. She had never lost a single engagement. She read the Collective's message 3 times. Then she called her senior officers to the bridge. "They want war," she said simply. "They will receive it." Captain Marcus Chun frowned at the tactical display. "Admiral, intelligence reports suggest the Collective has mobilized over 800,000 warships. We have fewer than 40,000 in active service across all fleets." "Numbers do not win wars, Captain," Helena replied. "Will does. Preparation does. Technology does." She turned to face her officers. These were men and women who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. They had drilled endlessly, studied every engagement in human history, and prepared for threats that most species could not imagine. "Contact Fleet Command," Helena ordered. "Tell them the Third Fleet is ready to move. And contact the First, Second, and Fourth Fleets as well. We will need everyone for this operation." Within hours, the greatest gathering of human military power in history began to assemble. Ships emerged from hidden bases scattered across the Empire. Carriers loaded with thousands of fighters. Battleships armed with weapons that could crack planets. Destroyers fast enough to outrun light itself. Support vessels carrying enough supplies to sustain a war for centuries. The Emperor himself addressed the assembled crews via holocom. He was an old man, wise beyond his years, chosen by the people to lead humanity through its darkest hours. "My children," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Our enemies believe us weak. They have looked at our young age, our small numbers, and our brief history among the stars. They have made a terrible mistake. We are humanity. We do not surrender. We do not yield. We do not die quietly. Show them what it means to threaten our home." The cheers that followed shook the very hulls of the assembled ships. Admiral Vance received her orders directly from the High Command. She was to lead the combined Imperial fleet into collective space. She was to end this war before it could truly begin. "How many ships do we have?" she asked her tactical officer. 37,412 combat vessels, came the reply. Plus 8,000 support craft. Helena nodded. It would be enough. The fleet jumped into hyperspace 12 hours after the Collective's ultimatum. They traveled faster than any collective vessel could track. Human engineers had spent centuries perfecting their jump drives, pushing the technology far beyond what any other species had achieved. The Collective's forward bases detected the human fleet too late. By the time their sensors registered the approaching ships, the battle was already over. Helena watched from her command chair as the first Collective station crumbled under the combined firepower of her fleet. Human weapons were different from anything the Collective had encountered. They did not fire simple energy beams or primitive projectiles. They fired concentrated bursts of destabilized matter that ignored shields and tore through armor like paper through water. Station Gamma 7 destroyed, reported Captain Chun, moving to next target. The Imperial fleet swept through the collective's outer defenses in less than an hour. 300 stations, 50 orbital platforms, and 2,000 patrol ships were reduced to expanding clouds of debris. The collective defenders never even managed to land a single hit on the human vessels. Deep within collective space, the High Council convened an emergency session. The 6 members of the ruling body stared at the reports coming in from the front lines. They could not believe what they were seeing. "This is impossible," declared Councillor Braxmoth. "No species has ever penetrated our defenses so quickly. Our shields are impervious to conventional weapons." "Their weapons are not conventional," replied Councillor Vexnera. "Our scientists cannot even understand the energy signatures. It is technology beyond anything in our databases." "Then we must deploy the Grand Fleet," said the eldest councillor, a creature so old that none remembered its name. "All 800,000 vessels. We will crush them with sheer numbers." The order went out. Every ship the collective possessed began converging on the advancing human fleet. It would be the largest naval engagement in galactic history. Admiral Vance received reports of the incoming armada with something approaching satisfaction. She had been hoping they would respond this way. "All ships, form up in defensive positions," she commanded. "Activate the network." Throughout the fleet, specialized equipment hummed to life. Each human ship was connected to every other through a system of quantum-linked computers. They could share information, coordinate attacks, and respond to threats in microseconds. Where the collective relied on individual commanders making individual decisions, the human fleet operated as a single unified entity. The first wave of collective ships arrived. They numbered over 200,000. Their weapons fired in massive concentrated volleys that would have vaporized any other fleet in the galaxy. But the human ships were no longer where those weapons were aimed. The Imperial fleet moved with impossible precision. Every ship knew exactly where every other ship would be at every moment. They slipped through the gaps in the collective's attacks, repositioning constantly, never presenting a stable target. And then they fired back. The destabilizer weapons struck the collective vessels in precise, coordinated patterns. They targeted engine rooms, weapon systems, and command centers with surgical accuracy. In the first 30 seconds of the engagement, 40,000 collective ships were disabled or destroyed. The second wave arrived. 200,000 more vessels. They tried different tactics, spreading out to avoid concentrated fire, approaching from multiple angles simultaneously. The human fleet adapted instantly. The quantum network recalculated firing solutions in real time. Ships that had been engaging targets on one side of the battlefield suddenly rotated to face new threats. The coordination was beyond anything organic minds could achieve. In 2 hours, the collective had lost over 500,000 ships. The human fleet had lost 37. Admiral Vance watched the destruction with cold professional detachment. She took no pleasure in this slaughter. These were living beings dying by the millions out there. But they had threatened her people. They had promised to erase humanity from existence. She would not allow that to happen. "Admiral, the remaining collective vessels are retreating," reported Captain Chun. "They are pulling back toward their homeworld." "Pursue," Helena ordered. "We end this today." The Imperial fleet gave chase. Their jump drives allowed them to cut off the retreat, surrounding the survivors before they could escape. The remaining 300,000 collective ships found themselves trapped, their backs against their own homeworld. The High Council watched from their chambers as their once mighty fleet crumbled around them. They had never experienced defeat. They had never even imagined it was possible. "We must surrender," said Councillor Vexenera. "There is no other option." "Surrender?" Braxmoth roared. The collective has never surrendered. We cannot show such weakness. Look at our fleet, the eldest counselor said quietly. In 4 hours, these humans have destroyed more of our ships than we have lost in 10,000 years of warfare. If we do not surrender, they will destroy our homeworld. They will end our civilization entirely. The message came through on all frequencies. The collective surrendered unconditionally. Admiral Vance accepted their submission personally. She stood aboard the command deck, looking down at the holographic image of the High Council members prostrating themselves before her. "Your empire is now under Terran protection," she declared. "You will release all enslaved species immediately. You will dismantle your military forces. You will submit to inspections by Imperial observers. In return, we will not destroy you." The councilors agreed to every term without argument. The war had lasted 7 hours and 43 minutes from start to finish. When the news reached Earth, celebrations erupted across the planet. The threat that had loomed so terrifyingly that morning had been completely eliminated by evening. Humanity had faced an ancient empire and shattered it in less than a single day. But in the quiet corners of Fleet Command, the admirals and generals exchanged knowing glances. This had not been a surprise to them. They had spent centuries preparing for exactly this scenario. Every piece of human technology had been developed with wars like this in mind. The destabilizer weapons had been in development for 200 years. The quantum network had taken a century and a half to perfect. The jump drives that allowed such rapid deployment were the result of 300 years of continuous improvement. Humanity had known that the galaxy was full of predators. They had known that someday something like the collective would come knocking. And so they had prepared. Admiral Helena Vance returned home to a hero's welcome. Parades were held in her honor across a dozen worlds. The Emperor awarded her the highest medal in the Empire, a recognition that would ensure her name was remembered for as long as humanity existed. But when reporters asked her about the victory, she simply shrugged. "They made a mistake," she said. "They looked at us and saw a young species. They saw small numbers. They saw an easy target. They did not see what we truly are." "And what are we?" the reporter asked. Helena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. There was only the cold certainty of someone who knew exactly what humanity was capable of. "We are the species that does not lose. We plan, we prepare, we adapt, and when something threatens our survival, we end that threat completely and permanently." The collective learned this lesson the hard way. Let us hope that any other species watching learned it as well. Across the galaxy, in throne rooms and command centers and hidden bunkers, the leaders of 1,000 civilizations watched the recordings of the battle. They had all considered expanding into human territory at one point or another. They had all looked at the Terran Empire and calculated whether conquest might be possible. None of them would ever make that calculation again. The message was clear. Humanity was not to be challenged, not to be threatened, not to be tested. Those who tried would learn the same lesson the collective had learned. They would learn it quickly. They would learn it completely. And they would not survive the education. The Terran Empire continued to grow, but now it grew unopposed. Species that had never considered alliance suddenly sought human friendship. Trade agreements that had stalled for decades were signed within days. The galaxy had witnessed the fall of its oldest and most feared power, and it had adjusted accordingly. And in the depths of space, the Imperial fleet patrolled its endless routes, watching, waiting, always ready. They had won this battle. They had ended this war. But they knew that peace was never permanent. Somewhere out there, another threat would eventually arise. When it did, humanity would be ready once again.